Push the line. Welcome back. This is Jay from the K, and today we're going to talk about a very crucial and very difficult, challenging thing for people in interviews, and that's answering those tough questions. Okay, I'm going to help you out with that today. So let's dig in. Over here. So there's three types of interview questions. Okay, so you have a skill-based questions. All three of these questions, formal questions, have different focuses. So your skill-based questions, they focus on your skills and your ability. Okay, so your work history, what skills you actually utilize. Okay, and then you have your traditional skill questions. They're gonna they're about you as a person and an employee. I just noticed a typo. Sorry. So it's about your employment and who you are as an employee and the person. Okay, then you have your behavioral and situational questions, and these are going to be looking at your past behaviors because it's the best indicator for your future behavior. And then they're going to ask you situational questions where they're kind of focused on hypothetical future events, right? Just to see how you would perform. Sometimes mostly under pressure, in a tight spot. They want to know what you would do. And so really they're looking for, like, do you have leadership qualities? Or are you going to be level-headed on the job when something happens? That's what they're kind of looking at. So they're going to ask these questions in order to get certain answers and get certain information about you without asking you directly. Okay. So this is everything we're talking about is really about interview techniques, the skill of interviewing, because interviewing is a skill. And a lot of times we don't realize that. We just walk into interviews with no training, no understanding of how to exert some certain skills in interviewing, and then we fall short. Okay, but I got you. We're gonna get through this. All right. So traditional questions. So when I said that you want to reform your responses, so here's a list of some of the most used traditional questions in interviews. And so when I did trainings, what I would also always ask the gentlemen that I train, I taught mostly men, right? I would tell them that you want to look at this list and find those things that stand out to you. When you are asked that question, you're like, ooh, I don't know how to answer that. Or you get nervous when I ask you that question, right? Maybe that question is related to a bad experience or whatever it is, right? But you have a difficulty answering that question. Well, those questions are the questions that you need to make responses for. And you need to go ahead and script them out. It's okay to script it out. You can write them down, put them in your notepad or your portfolio when you walk in, and you can actually read those questions off, right? You're not going to look crazy in the interview. You're actually going to look more prepared and ready. So don't worry about that. But if you see some of these asterisks on here, these are some of the ones that I highlighted just because I know there's some they're used a lot in interviews. Like the very first one, why did you leave your last job? Right? That's a doozy. Like, what if you quit your job? Or you got fired? How do you answer those type of questions? Right? So it's good to have this all scripted out so that you don't foul up in the interview, right? Or maybe how would you evaluate your ability to deal with conflict? This is one I always use because I want people to understand you have to look at the structuring of the question because they're asking you something. If you're not really listening, for one, you're going to show them he's not really listening or she's not really listening, but you're also not answering the question. So with that question, they ask you, how would you evaluate your ability to deal with conflict? And whenever that question is asked, I always hear people say, I do pretty good. But the question is, how do you evaluate your ability to deal with conflict? It's not about how do you deal with, or do you feel like you do well with conflict? Or are you a conflicting type of person? You're a contentious person? Or how do you actually, how can you tell, or I'm in conflict and I need to assess it. I need to work through this to resolve it because they're really trying to find out how do you resolve conflict, right? To make sure that they're not going to hire somebody who's going to go off and jump on somebody or something like that, right? So you want to look at these questions and write out some answers, okay? And try those answers out. Call somebody, say, hey man, if I ask you this, if I answer this question like this, how do you feel about it? You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure you have a friend or someone or family member who's been in management, or maybe you have a former boss that you're good with. You know, talk to them because these people have been trained on interviewing, right? And so you can pick their brains and say, hey, how do you think I should answer this question? Now, what do you think about my answer to this question? Okay. But at least that way, when you go into the interview, you're more prepared. Okay. All right, so you see the one at the very bottom. What can you tell me about this company, or why did you decide to seek a position with this company? This is where that company research comes in handy again, right? Because now you can speak to something specific, right? And that's going to make you shine when everybody else is just saying things like, well, lost my job due to COVID, and so I'm just, I can't get back in my field, got laid off at Spirit, and, I'm just looking for something, right? When you can say, well, I was in Spirit, I got laid off, and that kind of forced me. I was happy there, But when I started searching, I was looking for certain things because when I Spirit, what I liked about Spirit was da 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 da, and then I seen that you guys, you have the same type of values or those type of things you want to be able to talk to because that makes you look like, wow, this person really cares about what we do here. I think they really fit into our corporate culture. I'm gonna give them a shot. Okay. So let's look at some more questions. You also have your behavioral or situation-based questions. So these questions, again, are about your behaviors, past and future. Okay, and so these are the ones that they start with something like "Tell me about a time when," or "Describe this, that, and the other." Right. And so these questions, even with the traditional questions, they are very broad, open-ended questions. And so what happens is a lot of times people will answer a question, think or think that I have to answer according to uh, my background, work related background, my job experience or whatever. That's not the case because these questions, they might ask you a question like, "Tell me about a time when you planned something and things didn't go the way you expected." Like that's a very broad question. It's not saying, "Tell me a time." Describe a time when you were at work and things didn't go the way you planned it, right? It's just in general, life in general. And so you can feel comfortable just answering that question, talking about an experience. But I would say this, I would not use a school related question. Like I was in school, we were working on a group project and this didn't go right or whatever. Or it could be work, or it could be like family, Um, like I used to give an example of like a vacation. Like maybe say you had planned a vacation, and things just didn't go the way you expected it to go, or because it worked, it was the busy season, and out of nowhere it just it got really really busy, and so you had to make a hard decision to say to the family, hey, we got to push the vacation back because I need to be at work, right? That's a hard decision. It's something it's showing that you didn't plan this, but you recovered and you did the most responsible thing. You prioritized, and you faced it head on, right? But it's not anything bad or negative. You just didn't go on vacation at the time. But you also showed that work was important to you, right? And you didn't want to leave them short-staffed or whatnot. Okay, so things like that. And I'll be honest with you. Sometimes the answers may not be your answer, right? But it may be something that you're like, if I was in that situation, this is what I would do. You've had experiences when someone told you a story about something they went through, and you thought while they were talking, like, huh, well, if that was me, what I would have done is this or that, or I would have said this, I would have felt this way, right? And so you could very well utilize those experiences and put yourself in it and give it to the interviewer, right? Not saying that you're lying, but they're trying to find out how would you behave. Okay, so look at that list of questions, find the questions that you have a hard time answering, and then you want to script out answers for that. Okay, and again, you can write it down. You're not actually going to be reading it when you're in an interview anyway, because what's going to happen is your brain is going to, it's like muscle memory. Your brain is going to remember when you wrote that down. And so you're going to glance down, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, that's what I meant to say if they asked this. And so you're just you're gonna run with it. If you get off track, you can look back down, and that'll help you stay on course. All right. So let's look at some more of these questions. We're going to talk about the methods to answering some of these behavioral and situational questions because believe it or not, there are actual methods on how to answer these questions. Okay. All right. So the first one is called a STAR method. So that stands for the situation, the task, the action that you took, the result that came from it. Okay. And so you want to describe a situation or a dilemma at work or or a task that you were given, and then something came up that kind of impeded that, and stood in the way of you getting it done, or just made it complicated. All right. And so then you're going to talk about the action that you took, right? Even if it was a group effort, it was a project you guys were working on as a staff or whatever, you want to talk about what you did in that process, okay? All right. And then the results that you achieved, okay? So what happened? How did that event end? What did you accomplish? And then what did you learn from that experience, okay? And so you want to do like 3 or 4 of these. And if you got 3 or 4, pretty much any behavioral question they ask you, those 3 or 4 answers will work, right? And the beauty of that is that for interviews to come, you will have answers. And because they're such broad questions, those answers would pretty much fit almost any situation, okay? So that's why it's good to have those in your back pocket and keep them on deck whenever you go into an interview, okay? So then we have the SOAR method. So the SOAR method is just like the STAR method, except for it's talking about obstacles, okay? And how you got around the obstacle, how you eliminated the obstacle. So you have a situation, and you're gonna describe whatever that specific duty or responsibility that you had is, and then you're gonna talk about the actions that you took, how did you take away or minimize that obstacle. That's what they're looking at. And then the result that came from it. So how did it help? How much did it help? Because you want to quantify. You want to show them what actually came of it, right? Because again, you're talking to a hiring manager, you're talking to a supervisor, and they're dealing with numbers and figures and quantities all the time. And so when you can quantify the impact of your decision making, which is a skill, right? Or you stepping up to the plate and exerting some leadership, which is a skill. So if you did those things in that situation, what result came from it, right? Because now you're showcasing some of these skills that you didn't really talk about in your interview, or you did talk about. It's in your resume, it's in your summary qualifications. Now you're actually highlighting some of those skills. You're kind of showing them real world how you perform, right, under pressure in a tight spot. All right, so there you have it. Those are some of the tips and tricks on how to answer some of the most difficult and challenging interview questions. So I hope that helps you out so that you come across way more confident in your next interview. All right, so before you do leave, make sure that you do like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. Also follow us over on social media, on Facebook, Push the Line group, join that. All right, and I'll see you again next week. You guys be blessed.